I married you for business only. It's not real, the billionaire CEO said, but 2 years later, he couldn't still get over his wife. I married you for business only. It's not real. Those 8 words destroyed Sophia's world in less than 5 seconds. She had just walked into her husband's office, still excited from the charity gala where he had defended her art to some of the biggest collectors in the city. She wanted to thank him. Maybe even tell him she was falling in love with him. Instead, Gabriel didn't even look up from his computer. What did you just say? You heard me, Sophia. This marriage is a business contract. Nothing more. You get financial security and connections. I get a stable public image for my company's expansion. That's it. But Gabriel, the way you've been with me these past 2 years, the things you've done. Business networking. Don't read into it. Just like that, 2 years of what she thought was growing love became a lie. But here's the thing about this story that will blow your mind. Sometimes the cruelest thing someone can do to you ends up being exactly what both of you needed. Because Gabriel had no idea that his words would haunt him every single day for the next 2 years. He had no idea that pushing away the one person who truly saw him would nearly destroy him. And he definitely had no idea that when he finally realized what he had lost, it might already be too late. Have you ever made a decision that you immediately regretted but were too proud to take back? Have you ever been so scared of being vulnerable that you destroyed something beautiful? That's exactly what Gabriel did, and what happened next will show you why sometimes the biggest risk isn't opening your heart, it's keeping it closed. If you want to know how a man who had everything learned that he had thrown away the only thing that mattered, hit that like button right now and subscribe because this story will change how you think about love, fear, and second chances forever. To understand how we got to this devastating moment, we need to go back to the beginning. Gabriel Ashcroft wasn't always a cold, emotionally distant billionaire. But by the time he was 32, he had built walls so high around his heart that even he couldn't see over them anymore. His company, Ashcroft Industries, had started as a small tech startup in his garage. 10 years later, it was worth $12 billion. Gabriel had sacrificed everything for that success. Friendships, relationships, even basic human connection. He told himself it was worth it every time he saw his name on the Forbes list. But there was one problem with Gabriel's perfect life. The board of directors thought he was unstable. Too risky. A bachelor who changed girlfriends like he changed business suits wasn't exactly the image they wanted for their CEO as they planned to expand into European markets. Gabriel, we need to talk. This was Richard Morrison, the chairman of the board, sitting across from Gabriel's mahogany desk on a rainy Tuesday morning. What's on your mind, Richard? Your personal life. The investors are getting nervous. They see you as brilliant but unpredictable. The European expansion requires someone they can trust. Someone stable. Someone married. Gabriel leaned back in his chair. You want me to get married for business reasons? I want you to consider how your personal choices affect the company. Find someone appropriate. Someone who makes you look like a family man. That conversation happened on a Tuesday. By Friday, Gabriel had a plan. Sofia Martinez was struggling. Her art was incredible, but incredible art doesn't always pay the bills. She had been painting for 8 years, working 3 different jobs just to afford her tiny studio apartment. Her paintings hung in small coffee shops and local galleries, seen by maybe a dozen people on a good day. She had grown up poor, raised by a single mother who cleaned office buildings at night to pay the rent. Sofia learned early that money meant security, safety, the difference between having a home and sleeping in her car. But she also learned that creating something beautiful was the only thing that made life worth living. When Gabriel's assistant called her out of the blue on that Friday afternoon, Sofia thought it was a prank. Miss Martinez? Mr. Ashcroft would like to meet with you regarding a business proposition. Gabriel Ashcroft? The billionaire? Why would he want to meet with me? He'll explain everything tomorrow at 2 o'clock. The address is 1247, 5th Avenue, penthouse level. Sophia hung up the phone and stared at the paint-stained walls of her studio. Gabriel Ashcroft knew who she was. How? Why? She had never even been in the same room as someone worth that much money. What she didn't know was that Gabriel had spent the entire week researching local artists. Not because he cared about art, but because he needed someone who would fit his requirements. Someone beautiful enough to be believable, talented enough to be respectable, and most importantly, desperate enough to say yes to an impossible proposal. Sophia's background check had told him everything he needed to know. Struggling financially, no family connections that would complicate things, and genuinely talented enough that supporting her career would look like love rather than charity. Perfect. The meeting took place in Gabriel's penthouse conference room. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park. Sophia had never seen that much money in one space. Everything was white marble and crystal, cold and perfect and completely intimidating. Gabriel walked in wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Sophia made in 3 months. He was taller than she expected, with dark hair and gray eyes that seemed to see right through her. "Miss Martinez, thank you for coming. Can I offer you anything? Coffee? Water? I'm fine." "What's this about, Mr. Ashcroft?" Gabriel sat down across from her at the conference table. He had rehearsed this conversation, planned every word. "I have a proposition for you. It's going to sound crazy, but I need you to hear me out." Sophia waited. "I need a wife. Not for love, not for romance, but for business. My company is expanding internationally, and the investors need to see stability. A family man. Someone they can trust with their money." Sophia's eyes widened. "You want me to marry you? For 2 years. Strictly business. You would get financial security, connections in the art world that could launch your career, and enough money to never worry about rent or groceries again. In exchange, you would attend events with me, play the role of the supportive wife, and help me maintain the right public image. This is insane. The offer is $5 million. $2 million up front, $3 million when the contract ends after 2 years. Plus all living expenses, art supplies, and I'll personally introduce you to every gallery owner and collector in the city." Sophia felt the room spinning. $5 million. She could pay off her mother's medical debt. She could focus on her art without worrying about money for the rest of her life. She could actually become the artist she dreamed of being. "What would you expect from me? Public appearances. Charity events. Business dinners. You'd live in the penthouse, have your own studio space, complete freedom to pursue your art. The only rule is that we maintain the image of a happy marriage when we're in public. And in private? In private, we're business partners. Nothing more." Sophia looked out at the city below them. Every logical part of her brain was screaming that this was a terrible idea. But the part of her that had watched her mother work 3 jobs, the part of her that had eaten ramen noodles for dinner 5 nights in a row, that part was listening. "I need 24 hours to think about it." "Of course. But Sophia, I want you to know that I chose you specifically because I think you're incredibly talented. This isn't charity. You deserve success, and I can help you get it." That night, Sophia called her mother. "Mama, what would you do if someone offered you everything you ever wanted, but it meant living a lie?" "Mija, sometimes we do what we have to do to survive. But be careful that you don't lose yourself in the process." The next morning, Sophia called Gabriel. "I'll do it." 3 weeks later, they were married in a small ceremony at City Hall. Sophia wore a white dress she bought at a department store. Gabriel wore the same charcoal suit from their first meeting. The witnesses were his lawyer and her best friend Maria. The whole thing took 15 minutes. "You may kiss the bride." Gabriel leaned in and kissed her softly on the lips. It was brief, professional, completely meaningless. But Sophia felt something flutter in her chest that she told herself was just nerves. That night, Gabriel showed her to her bedroom in the penthouse. It was bigger than her entire apartment, with its own bathroom and a walk-in closet filled with clothes in her exact size. "How did you know my measurements? My assistant is very thorough. If anything doesn't fit, just let her know." He turned to leave. "Gabriel?" "Yes. Thank you for this opportunity. I know it's just business, but it means everything to me." Gabriel nodded and walked away. He didn't tell her that something about the way she said his name made his chest feel tight. He didn't tell her that watching her eyes light up when she saw the art supplies he had ordered for her studio made him feel something he hadn't felt in years. He definitely didn't tell her that he had to fight the urge to kiss her properly when the judge pronounced them husband and wife. The first few months were exactly what Gabriel had planned. They attended charity galas, business dinners, and art exhibitions. Sophia played her part perfectly, charming investors and their wives, asking intelligent questions about Gabriel's work, smiling at all the right moments. In public, they looked like the perfect couple. Gabriel would put his hand on the small of her back when they walked into a room. Sophia would straighten his tie before important meetings. They had inside jokes that made other couples jealous. But at home, they were polite strangers sharing a very expensive space. Gabriel worked 16-hour days, just like he always had. Sophia painted in her studio, creating pieces that were getting more beautiful and complex with each passing week. They rarely saw each other except when they had public appearances. Until the morning Gabriel brought her coffee. It was a Saturday, 3 months into their arrangement. Gabriel had gotten up early to review contracts before a golf meeting with potential investors. As he made his coffee, he noticed that Sophia was already in her studio. He could see her through the glass doors, completely absorbed in a painting of the city skyline at sunrise. Without really thinking about it, he made a second cup of coffee and took it to her. "Thought you might need this." Sophia looked up, surprised. She had paint in her hair and smudged across her cheek. "Thank you. You didn't have to do that." "I know." Gabriel found himself studying her painting. The way she captured light was incredible. The sunrise looked so real he could almost feel the warmth coming off the canvas. "It's beautiful, Sophia. Really beautiful." "You think so? I've never seen anyone paint light the way you do. It's like you understand something about it that other people miss." Sophia smiled, and Gabriel felt that same tight feeling in his chest. This time, he couldn't ignore it. "I should let you get back to work." But he didn't move. He stood there watching her paint, fascinated by the way her hands moved, the complete focus on her face, the way she seemed to bring the canvas to life with every brushstroke. "Gabriel?" "Yeah. Nothing. It's just nice to have company." That became their routine. Gabriel would bring Sophia coffee on Saturday mornings, and she would let him watch her paint. They didn't talk much, but there was something comfortable about the silence between them. Then came the dinner party where everything started to change. Gerald Morrison, the board chairman, was hosting a dinner for potential investors. It was exactly the kind of event Gabriel had gotten married for. Important people, big money, serious conversations about the future of the company. Gabriel and Sophia arrived together, playing their parts perfectly. But during dinner, something unexpected happened. "So Sophia," said Patricia Morrison, Gerald's wife, "Gabriel tells us you're an artist." "How quaint. What kind of little paintings do you do?" The condescension in her voice was obvious. Gabriel felt his jaw tighten. "I work primarily in oils," Sophia replied politely. "Landscapes and cityscapes, mostly. I'm interested in the way light changes throughout the day and how it affects our perception of familiar places." "Oh, how sweet. Like a hobby." It's not a hobby, Gabriel said, his voice sharper than intended. Sophia is incredibly talented. Her work is sophisticated and technically brilliant. Patricia looked surprised. Oh, I didn't realize you were so involved in the art world, Gabriel. I'm learning. Sophia is teaching me to see things differently. Under the table, Sophia's hand found Gabriel's. She squeezed gently, a silent thank you for defending her. Gabriel squeezed back, and for the rest of the dinner, he didn't let go. That night, as they rode home in the car, Sophia turned to him. Thank you for what you said at dinner. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Patricia Morrison is a snob, and what she said was insulting. Your art is incredible, and anyone with eyes can see that. You really think my work is good? Gabriel looked at her sitting there in the back seat, still wearing the blue dress she had chosen for the dinner, her dark hair falling over one shoulder. In the streetlights passing by, she looked beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or expensive clothes. I think you're going to be famous someday, Sophia. And when you are, I'll get to say I knew you before anyone else believed in you. Something shifted between them in that moment. It was subtle, like the change in light that Sophia was always trying to capture in her paintings. But it was real. From that night forward, their relationship started to evolve. Gabriel began coming home earlier, joining Sophia for dinner instead of eating alone in his office. They would talk about her art, his business, random things they had seen during the day. Gabriel discovered that Sophia was funny, incredibly smart, and had opinions about everything from politics to which coffee shop made the best croissants. Sophia learned that Gabriel wasn't actually the cold, calculating person she had first met. When he relaxed, when he forgot to guard himself, he was thoughtful and genuinely interested in the world around him. 6 months into their marriage, Gabriel realized he looked forward to coming home. Not to his penthouse, but to Sophia. To her laugh, to watching her paint, to the way she would tell him about her day while they cooked dinner together. 8 months in, Sophia caught herself studying Gabriel's profile while he read contracts on Sunday mornings, thinking about how she would paint the way the light fell across his face. 10 months in, they fell asleep on the couch together while watching an old movie, and Gabriel woke up with Sophia curled against his side. Instead of moving away, he pulled a blanket over both of them and went back to sleep. But Gabriel was terrified of what was happening. He had spent years building walls around his heart, and Sophia was dismantling them without even trying. Every smile, every shared joke, every moment of understanding was dangerous. Love was weakness. Love made you vulnerable. Love made you do stupid things that destroyed everything you had worked for. So Gabriel started pulling away. He began working late again. He stopped bringing Sophia coffee on Saturday mornings. When she would try to tell him about her day, he would give short answers and excuse himself to make phone calls. Sophia noticed the change immediately. The warmth that had been growing between them disappeared, replaced by the polite distance they had started with. But now it hurt in a way it hadn't before, because she knew what they were capable of. She tried to convince herself it didn't matter. This was always supposed to be temporary. A business arrangement. But somewhere along the way, she had started to fall in love with her own husband. The morning of the charity gala that would change everything, Sophia stood in her studio looking at the painting she had just finished. It was a portrait of a man sitting alone at a conference table, surrounded by glass and steel and the cold light of the city. The man's face wasn't visible, but his posture told the whole story. Successful, powerful, and completely isolated. She had painted Gabriel without meaning to. The Gabriel she was afraid he was becoming again. It's beautiful, but it's sad. Sophia spun around. Gabriel stood in the doorway of her studio, dressed for work but not in a hurry to leave. I didn't hear you come in. I wanted to see what you were working on. Is that supposed to be me? Sophia hesitated. It's supposed to be loneliness. Success without connection. The price we pay for putting ambition before everything else. Gabriel stepped closer to study the painting. You think that's who I am? I think that's who you're trying to be. But I've seen the other version of you, Gabriel. The one who makes me coffee and defends my art and falls asleep during old movies. That person isn't lonely. Gabriel felt his walls cracking. Everything in him wanted to tell her that she was right, that he had been happier in the past few months than he had ever been in his life. That coming home to her felt like the first real thing he had experienced since he was a child. Instead, he looked at his watch. I have a meeting. We should leave for the gala by 7 tonight. Gabriel. 7 o'clock, Sophia. He walked out of the studio, leaving Sophia alone with her painting and the growing certainty that she was about to lose something she had never expected to want. The Whitfield Foundation Gala was the social event of the season. Everyone who mattered in New York was there, wearing designer gowns and discussing million-dollar art acquisitions over champagne and lobster. Sophia wore an emerald green dress that Gabriel had chosen for her. It was beautiful, elegant, and made her feel like she belonged in rooms like this. She had learned to navigate these events over the past year, charming donors and collectors while subtly promoting her own work. But tonight felt different. Gabriel was distant, professional, treating her like a business associate rather than his wife. When people asked about her art, he would nod politely and change the subject to business. Until they met Harrison Whitfield himself. Gabriel, wonderful to see you. And this must be the famous artist wife I've been hearing about. Harrison, this is Sophia. Sophia, Harrison Whitfield. Sophia shook his hand, recognizing him immediately. The Whitfield Foundation was one of the most prestigious art organizations in the country. A recommendation from Harrison could launch any artist's career. I've been following your work, my dear. Very impressive. That series you did on urban landscapes was particularly striking. Thank you, Mr. Whitfield. That means a great deal coming from you. I was actually hoping to discuss a possible exhibition. We're always looking for fresh talent, and your perspective on light and space is exactly what we need. Sophia's heart raced. A Whitfield Foundation exhibition would change everything. It would establish her as a serious artist, guarantee museum attention, ensure financial success for the rest of her career. I'd be honored to discuss it with you. Excellent. I'll have my curator call you next week. But then Harrison turned to Gabriel. You must be very proud of your wife's talent, Gabriel. Of course. Sophia is very dedicated to her work. More than dedicated, I'd say. She's genuinely gifted. You're a lucky man to have found someone who brings so much beauty into the world. Gabriel's response was cool, professional. Sophia's success reflects well on both of us. It's been mutually beneficial. Harrison raised an eyebrow at the clinical tone, but Gabriel continued. Her connections in the art world have been valuable for business networking. It's opened doors that might have remained closed otherwise. Sophia felt her cheeks burn. Gabriel was talking about her like she was a business asset, reducing her talent and their relationship to a networking opportunity. Well, Harrison said uncomfortably, I suppose there are many ways to appreciate art. Sophia, I look forward to our conversation. He walked away, leaving Sophia standing next to Gabriel in stunned silence. Did you just tell Harrison Whitfield that I'm a business networking tool? I told him the truth. Your art connections have been beneficial for the company. Beneficial? Gabriel, that was the most important conversation of my artistic career, and you made it sound like I'm some kind of marketing strategy. Isn't that what this is? What we are? A mutually beneficial arrangement. The coldness in Gabriel's voice cut through her like ice. This wasn't the man who had brought her coffee and defended her art. This was the stranger she had married 18 months ago. I need some air. Sophia walked out to the terrace, trying to process what had just happened. Gabriel had not only dismissed her art, but he had done it in front of the one person who could change her entire career. But underneath her hurt and embarrassment was something else. Fear. Fear that Gabriel was right, that everything between them had been an illusion. That she had fallen in love with someone who saw her as nothing more than a convenient business accessory. 20 minutes later, Gabriel found her on the terrace. "We should go back inside. There are people I need to talk to." "Of course there are." "Sophia, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, Gabriel. You made yourself very clear in there." Gabriel felt the walls he had built around his heart lock into place. This was exactly what he had been afraid of. Emotions, complications, the messy unpredictability of caring about someone. "I stated facts. Our arrangement has been mutually beneficial. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging that. Our arrangement." "Right." They didn't speak during the car ride home. Gabriel stared out his window at the city lights while Sophia watched the buildings blur past in silence. By the time they reached the penthouse, the distance between them felt like an ocean. Sophia went straight to Gabriel's office to thank him for the evening, to try to bridge the gap that had opened between them. She had decided to tell him how she felt, to take the risk that had been building in her chest for months. That's when she found him buried in merger documents, typing furiously on his laptop as if the night had never happened. "Gabriel, about tonight at the gala, when you defended my work to the Whitfield Foundation, it meant everything to me. I wanted to tell you that I..." He didn't look up. "Gabriel, did you hear me?" Finally, his steel-gray eyes lifted to meet hers. Cold. Distant. Almost annoyed. "I heard you, Sophia. And I need you to understand something very clearly." His voice was calm, clinical, devastating. "I married you for business only. It's not real." The words hung in the air like shards of broken glass. Everything Sophia had been feeling, everything she thought had been growing between them, shattered in an instant. "What do you mean it's not real?" "It's exactly what it sounds like. A mutually beneficial contract. You get financial security and connections for your art career. I get the stable public image necessary for my company's European expansion. Nothing more. But the way you look at me, the way you defended my work tonight, the coffee you bring me every morning. Business networking. Your success reflects well on our arrangement." Gabriel's voice was flat, emotionless. He had turned himself back into the cold, calculating businessman who had first proposed this marriage. The man who had brought her coffee on Saturday mornings, who had fallen asleep beside her on the couch, who had made her believe that love was possible, that man had disappeared. "Our arrangement," Sophia repeated slowly. "Is that what you call it?" "It's what it is. Don't read more into it than exists." Sophia felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Not here. Not in front of him. And if I wanted to end our arrangement?" For just a moment, something flickered across Gabriel's face. Pain, regret, desperate longing, Sophia couldn't tell. But then it was gone, replaced by professional indifference. "The prenup is very clear about the terms. You're free to leave whenever you choose. The $2 million you've already received is yours regardless." The casualness of his response was the final blow. Sophia nodded once, her throat too tight for words, and walked away. Behind her, Gabriel's hands trembled over his keyboard. Every instinct in his body was screaming at him to go after her, to take back those horrible words, to tell her that she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. Instead, he sat in his office and typed meaningless words on merger documents while his heart broke in his chest. In their bedroom, Sophia pulled out the suitcase she had hoped never to need. Each piece of clothing she folded felt like a small death. The blue dress from their first real dinner together. The sweater Gabriel had said made her eyes look like coffee with cream. The silk blouse she had worn the morning he first told her that her art was beautiful. All of it meaningless. All of it business. She was almost finished packing when she heard Gabriel's footsteps in the hallway. They stopped outside the bedroom door. For a breathless moment, Sophia thought he might come in. Thought he might take back those devastating words and tell her that he had been lying, that he was scared, that he loved her too. Instead, she heard him continue down the hall to his study. The door closed with quiet finality. Sophia sat on the edge of the bed she had never shared with her husband and finally let herself cry. Not just for the love she had lost, but for the love she had never really had. At 3 in the morning, she left their penthouse with 2 suitcases and a broken heart. Gabriel's last memory of his wife was the sound of the front door closing behind her. 3 months later, Gabriel stood in his office staring at the divorce papers his lawyer had just delivered. The documents were thorough, professional, exactly what he had expected. Sophia was asking for nothing beyond what their prenup had specified. No alimony, no claims on his property, no demands for more money. She was making it easy for him to let her go. So why did he feel like he was dying? Gabriel should have felt relief. The European merger was complete, his company's valuation had doubled, and his schedule was no longer complicated by gallery openings or quiet dinners where Sophia's laugh had made him forget about quarterly projections. Everything had returned to the precise, controlled order he had maintained before she entered his life. So why did he feel like he was suffocating? The penthouse was exactly the same as it had been before their marriage. Clean, minimalist, expensive. But now it felt like a mausoleum. Gabriel would walk through rooms where Sophia had once painted, where she had curled up reading books about Renaissance masters, where she had filled the silence with her presence. She had left behind one painting. A canvas of their terrace garden during golden hour, painted on one of those Saturday mornings when Gabriel had brought her coffee and watched her work. He told himself he kept it because it matched the decor. But late at night, when he couldn't sleep, he would stand in front of it trying to see the world through her eyes. The worst part was how successful he had become. Every business metric was up. Profit margins, market share, international expansion, all of it exceeded projections. Gabriel Ashcroft was officially one of the most successful CEOs in America. He had never been more miserable in his life. "Sir, you have the Richardson meeting at 2, then the board presentation at 4. His assistant, Jennifer, stood in his office doorway with her tablet, running through his schedule like she had every day for the past 5 years. "Cancel the Richardson meeting." "Sir." Gabriel looked up from the financial reports he wasn't really reading. "Cancel it. Move it to next week." "Is everything all right, Mr. Ashcroft?" Everything was not all right. Gabriel had spent 3 months trying to convince himself that he had made the right choice. That pushing Sophia away had been necessary. That love was a luxury he couldn't afford. But every morning when he made his coffee, he automatically made a second cup before remembering she wasn't there. Every Saturday, he found himself walking toward her studio before catching himself. Every business dinner felt empty without her beside him, charming investors and asking intelligent questions about art. "I'm fine, Jennifer. Just reschedule the meeting." That night, Gabriel did something he hadn't done since Sophia left. He went to her old studio space. The room was empty now, nothing but white walls and afternoon light streaming through the windows. But he could still imagine her there, brush in hand, completely absorbed in bringing something beautiful to life. He pulled out his phone and, before he could stop himself, searched for her name online. What he found changed everything. Local artist Sofia Martinez prepares for solo exhibition at Meridian Gallery. The article was from 2 weeks ago. Gabriel read it 3 times, studying the accompanying photo of Sophia standing next to one of her paintings. She looked different. Stronger. Her hair was shorter, her clothes more sophisticated, but it was her expression that stopped him cold. She looked confident, self-possessed, like someone who had learned exactly who she was. The exhibition was called Fragments of Light and it was opening tomorrow night. Gabriel stared at his phone screen until the words blurred together. Sophia had done it. She had built the career she had always dreamed of, without his connections, without his money, completely on her own. He should have been happy for her. Instead, he felt like someone had carved out his chest with a spoon. Have you ever realized that the person you thought you were protecting by pushing them away actually became stronger without you? Have you ever discovered that someone you convinced yourself was better off alone had built something incredible in your absence? That's exactly what Gabriel learned when he read about Sophia's exhibition. Because while Gabriel had been drowning in his successful, empty life, Sophia had been transforming her pain into something beautiful. The months after leaving Gabriel were the hardest of Sophia's life. She moved into a tiny studio apartment in Brooklyn, using the money from their arrangement to rent a space that was 1/3 the size of Gabriel's closet. But it was hers. Every cramped corner, every creaky floorboard, every view of the fire escape instead of Central Park, all of it belonged to her. The first month was brutal. Sophia would wake up reaching for Gabriel's warmth before remembering he was never really hers to begin with. She would make coffee and automatically pour a second cup out of habit. She would start to tell him about something funny that happened during her day before the silence reminded her that she was alone. But slowly, something began to change. The pain that felt like it might destroy her started to fuel something else. Something fiercer. Something that demanded to be expressed. Sophia painted like her life depended on it. Not because she had to, but because she needed to. The canvases became windows into everything she couldn't say out loud. The betrayal, the hope, the love that still existed despite everything, the strength she was discovering in herself. She called the series Fragments of Light because that's what healing felt like. Not a sudden burst of sunshine, but tiny pieces of illumination that gradually showed her who she really was. 3 months after leaving Gabriel, Sophia met Marcus Rivera. Marcus was the owner of the Meridian Gallery, a respected space in Soho that showcased emerging artists. He was 62 years old, with silver hair and kind eyes that seemed to see straight through pretense to the truth underneath. These paintings, he said, studying the canvases Sophia had brought to show him. They're honest in a way that most art isn't. Raw. But there's hope in them too. Thank you. I wasn't sure if they were too personal to show. Personal is what makes art matter. Anyone can paint a pretty picture. Not everyone can paint their soul. Marcus became more than a gallery owner. He became a mentor, a friend, someone who believed in Sophia's talent when she was still learning to believe in it herself. Under his guidance, she began to understand that her pain wasn't something to hide from. It was something to transform. The best artists, Marcus told her one afternoon as they hung her paintings for a group show, are the ones who learn to turn their wounds into windows. People look through your pain and see their own. Sophia's work began to gain attention. Not because of her connection to Gabriel Ashcroft, but because her paintings spoke to something universal. The loneliness of modern life. The courage it took to love someone completely. The strength required to rebuild yourself when everything fell apart. 6 months after leaving Gabriel, Sophia sold her first painting to a serious collector. 8 months later, she was featured in Art Today magazine. 10 months later, Marcus offered her a solo exhibition at his gallery. Are you sure I'm ready for this? Sophia, I've been in this business for 30 years. I know talent when I see it. You're not just ready. You're necessary. But success wasn't the only thing that was changing in Sophia's life. She was changing too. The woman who had once been afraid to take up space, who had accepted Gabriel's cruel words as truth, was becoming someone who knew her own worth. She started taking evening classes in art history. She traveled to museums in other cities, studying masters whose work she had only seen in books. She made friends with other artists, building a community that understood the unique challenges of creating something from nothing. And then there was James. James Keller was a sculptor who worked in the studio next to Sophia's. He was tall, with dark hair and gentle hands that could shape clay into impossible beauty. He had been watching Sophia's transformation with quiet admiration for months before he finally got the courage to ask her to dinner. "I'm not sure I'm ready for that," Sophia told him honestly. "I'm not asking you to be ready for anything except dinner. One meal. No expectations." James was patient in a way that Gabriel had never been. He listened when Sophia talked about her art. He didn't try to fix her problems or give her advice unless she asked for it. He simply showed up, consistently and kindly, proving that not all men saw relationships as business transactions. "Tell me about the paintings in your exhibition," James said one evening as they walked through Central Park. It was the same park Sophia used to see from Gabriel's penthouse windows, but now she was experiencing it from ground level. It felt more real this way. They're about fragments. Pieces of light, pieces of pain, pieces of hope. How sometimes things have to break completely before they can become something new. Like you. Sophia considered this. Like me. I spent 2 years trying to be what someone else wanted me to be. Now I'm learning who I actually am. And who are you? Sophia smiled. For the first time in months, she had an answer. I'm someone who creates beautiful things. Someone who survived heartbreak and became stronger. Someone who doesn't need to be saved because she learned to save herself. The night before her exhibition opening, Sophia stood in the Meridian Gallery surrounded by 2 years of her life hanging on white walls. Each painting told part of her story. The early pieces, dark and jagged with fresh pain. The middle works, where color began to creep back in. The newest paintings, bold and luminous with hard-won hope. You should be proud, Marcus said, joining her in front of the centerpiece of the exhibition. It was a painting she had called Departure, showing a woman walking away down a rain-soaked street, her figure becoming smaller but somehow more defined with each step. I am proud. But I'm also terrified. What if no one comes? What if the critics hate it? What if I'm not actually as good as I think I am? Marcus laughed. Sophia, I've been doing this for 30 years. Trust me when I tell you that tomorrow night is going to change your life. What Marcus didn't tell her was that Gabriel Ashcroft had been calling the gallery all week, asking about tickets to the opening. What he didn't mention was that the anonymous buyer who had purchased The Isolation of Ambition, Sophia's painting of a lonely man at a conference table, had been very specific about wanting that particular piece. Some secrets, Marcus had learned, revealed themselves when they were ready. The night of the exhibition opening, the Meridian Gallery was packed. Critics, collectors, art lovers, and curious New Yorkers filled the warm, well-lit space. Sophia moved through the crowd in a midnight blue dress, her hair swept up to reveal the graceful line of her neck. She had lost weight since leaving Gabriel, her cheekbones sharper, but there was a strength in her bearing that hadn't been there during their marriage. Miss Martinez, your use of light in these pieces is extraordinary. How do you achieve such luminosity? Thank you. I think it comes from learning to find brightness in dark places. Sometimes the most beautiful light comes after the longest nights. Across the room, Gabriel stood near the back wall, having arrived late enough to avoid drawing attention. He wore a black suit and had told himself he was only here to see how Sophia was doing. To make sure she was all right. To prove to himself that leaving had been the right decision for both of them. Instead, he found himself watching her work the room with grace and intelligence, discussing technique and inspiration with people who genuinely respected her talent. This wasn't the struggling artist he had married. This was a successful, confident woman who had built something meaningful from her own vision and determination. The painting that held his attention hung in the center of the main wall. It showed a man seen from behind, standing at a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking a city at twilight. The figure's shoulders carried a weight that spoke of success that felt hollow, of looking out at the world without truly seeing it. Gabriel knew, with devastating certainty, that he was looking at himself through Sophia's eyes. She painted that one during the last month of your marriage. Gabriel turned to find Marcus Rivera standing beside him. He had met the gallery owner several times during his marriage to Sophia, had always found the older man's perceptive gaze unsettling. She never said anything about painting me. Sophia doesn't need words to communicate. She has other languages. Marcus studied Gabriel with shrewd eyes. She called it, the isolation of ambition. It was the hardest piece for her to part with, but she said it needed to be seen. Gabriel's chest tightened. She's selling it? Already sold, actually. Anonymous buyer. Someone who understood exactly what the painting was saying. Before Gabriel could respond, the sound of Sophia's laugh drew his attention across the room. She stood near another painting, one that captured a couple's intertwined hands, the light between their fingers suggesting both connection and the spaces that love couldn't bridge. A tall, dark-haired man stood beside her, his attention focused entirely on her face as she spoke. Something violent and unfamiliar twisted in Gabriel's chest as he watched the stranger lean closer to whisper something that made Sophia smile. The expression on her face was lighter than he had seen in months, free of the careful guardedness she had worn during their final weeks together. "That's James Keller," Marcus said, following Gabriel's gaze. "Sculptor, quite talented. He's been very supportive of Sophia's work lately." The words hit Gabriel like a physical blow. He had convinced himself that leaving had been a kindness, that Sophia would be better off without the complications of his emotional limitations. Seeing her laugh with another man, seeing the way her entire body seemed to relax in James's presence, Gabriel realized he had been telling himself lies. He had been so afraid of admitting he had fallen in love with his own wife that he had driven her away rather than risk the vulnerability that love demanded. "She's moving to Florence next month," Marcus added casually, though his tone suggested nothing about the revelation was casual. "James has connections with several galleries there. Fresh start and all." Gabriel felt the world tilt beneath his feet. Florence. An ocean away. A life where she could build something beautiful without the shadow of their failed marriage following her. Good for her, Gabriel managed, the words scraping against his throat like broken glass. Marcus gave him a long look. "You know, for a man who built an empire on reading market trends and identifying opportunities, you're remarkably blind to what's right in front of you." Before Gabriel could ask what he meant, Marcus had melted back into the crowd, leaving Gabriel alone with the devastating realization that he was about to lose the only thing that had ever truly mattered. For 20 minutes, Gabriel stood frozen, watching Sophia's success, watching her happiness, watching the life she had built without him. Every instinct told him to leave. To let her have this moment, this future, this chance at real love with someone who wouldn't hurt her. But then Sophia walked over to stand in front of departure, and Gabriel found himself moving toward her before he could stop himself. The exhibition was winding down when Gabriel finally found the courage to approach Sophia. She stood alone in front of the painting that depicted a woman walking away down a rain-soaked street, her figure becoming smaller and more distant with each step. "Congratulations," he said softly, coming to stand beside her. "The exhibition is incredible. You should be proud." Sophia didn't turn to look at him, but her shoulders tensed slightly. "Thank you. I didn't expect to see you here. I couldn't stay away." The admission slipped out more honestly than he had intended, and Gabriel saw her finally turn to face him, something wary and hopeful warring in her dark eyes. She looked older, more self-possessed, as if the months apart had crystallized something essential within her. But there were shadows beneath her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and healing wounds, and Gabriel hated knowing he had caused them. "The painting you sold," he said, nodding toward where the isolation of ambition had hung. "The one of the man at the window. What about it?" Gabriel met her gaze, letting her see past the walls he had built so carefully. "Was that how you saw me? All those months we lived together?" Sophia studied his face for a long moment, as if searching for sincerity beneath his usual armor. "Sometimes. In the quiet moments when you thought no one was watching. You looked so alone, even when the room was full of people. The truth in her words cut deeper than any accusation could have. Gabriel had been alone, had cultivated that isolation as protection against the chaos of feeling too much. But somewhere in their 2 years of marriage, Sophia had slipped past his defenses without him even realizing it. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "About what I said that night. About us being just business." Sophia's expression remained carefully neutral, but Gabriel caught the slight tremor in her hands. "Were you? Because it felt very much like you meant it." "I meant it to hurt." The confession tasted like ashes. "I meant it to push you away because I was terrified of how much you'd started to mean to me. And now?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. Gabriel took a step closer, close enough to catch the faint scent of her perfume, the one he had missed in every room of their empty penthouse. "Now I realize I've spent 3 months dying slowly without you. Now I understand that all the success in the world means nothing if I don't have someone to share it with who sees beauty where I only see numbers." Tears gathered in Sophia's eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "You can't just say these things, Gabriel. You can't come here the night before I leave for a new life and expect words to fix what you broke." "I know." Gabriel's voice cracked slightly. "I know I have no right to ask for anything. But I need you to know that loving you was the most terrifying and the most real thing I've ever felt. I was just too much of a coward to admit it." "Was?" she asked, catching the past tense. Gabriel reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. Sophia recognized the divorce papers immediately, but when she looked closer, she saw they had been torn in half. "I can't sign them," he said simply. "I've tried every day for 3 months, and I can't do it. Because despite what I said, despite how badly I hurt you, our marriage was the realest thing in my life. You were the realest thing in my life." Sophia stared at the torn papers, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Gabriel. I know you're leaving for Florence. I know you've built a life without me, and you have every right to that happiness. But if there's any part of you that still believes in us, if there's any chance you could forgive a man who was too afraid of love to recognize it when he had it." Gabriel's voice broke completely. "I'll spend the rest of my life proving that you were never just business to me. You were everything." Across the gallery, James watched their conversation with understanding eyes. He had known, somehow, that this moment was inevitable. That for all of Sophia's strength and independence, there was still a part of her heart that belonged to the man who had first believed in her art, even if he had been too scared to believe in their love. "You hurt me so deeply," Sophia whispered. "You made me believe I was just another acquisition, another asset in your portfolio. I know. And I'll regret those words until the day I die. But Sophia, please look at me." Gabriel waited until her eyes met his, letting her see all the love and regret and desperate hope he had hidden for so long. "You were never an acquisition. You were the person who taught me that life without love isn't really living at all. You were the woman who made me want to be better than the man I thought I had to be." Sophia searched his face, looking for traces of the cold stranger who had dismissed their marriage so cruelly. Instead, she saw a vulnerability that cut straight through her defenses, raw emotion that he wasn't trying to hide or control. "If I stayed," she said slowly, "if I gave us another chance, it couldn't be the same. I won't go back to being a convenient accessory in your perfect life." "I don't want convenient," Gabriel said fiercely. "I want messy and complicated and real. I want to fight and make up and fight again. I want to watch you paint and listen to you talk about light and shadow until I start to see the world the way you do. I want to love you the way you deserve to be loved from the beginning." Sophia felt something crack open inside her chest, all the careful walls she had built to protect herself crumbling in the face of his desperate honesty. She thought of Florence, of the safe new life waiting for her, and realized it would always feel incomplete without the infuriating, brilliant, emotionally complicated man standing in front of her. "I love you," Gabriel whispered, the words raw and unpolished. I love your laugh and your terrible taste in morning television and the way you leave paint tubes scattered everywhere. I love how passionate you get about art and how you make me want to be worthy of the way you used to look at me. Used to? Sophia asked, stepping closer. Gabriel cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing away her tears. I'm hoping you might look at me that way again someday. If you'll let me earn it. Instead of answering with words, Sophia rose on her toes and kissed him, pouring 2 years of hurt and hope and stubborn, enduring love into the connection. Gabriel kissed her back like a drowning man breathing air, his arms wrapping around her as if he would never let her go again. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sophia rested her forehead against his. No more walls, she said firmly. No more pretending we're just a business arrangement. Never again, Gabriel promised. Just us, figuring out how to love each other better every day. As the gallery emptied around them, they stood holding each other beneath the warm lights, surrounded by Sophia's art and the promise of a future built on truth instead of convenience. James approached them quietly, his expression understanding and kind. Sophia, I think Florence will have to wait. She turned to him with tears in her eyes. James, I'm so sorry. I never meant for. Don't apologize. Love like this doesn't come along often. When it does, you fight for it. He kissed her cheek gently. Be happy, Sophia. You deserve it. 6 months later, Gabriel and Sophia renewed their vows in the same gallery where they had found each other again. This time, there were no contracts, no business arrangements, no walls between them. Just two people who had learned that the biggest risk isn't opening your heart, it's keeping it closed. Gabriel sold his penthouse and bought a house in Brooklyn with a huge studio space and south-facing windows that filled every room with the light Sophia loved to paint. He scaled back his work schedule, hired managers he trusted, and learned that success meant more than profit margins. Sophia never did move to Florence, but she did have exhibitions in Paris, London, and Tokyo. Gabriel attended every opening, not as a business obligation, but because watching his wife share her gift with the world was better than any deal he had ever closed. They fought sometimes, because real love isn't perfect. They disagreed about everything from where to hang paintings to how many business trips were too many. But they fought with the knowledge that they were on the same side, building something together instead of protecting themselves from each other. Have you ever wondered if it's possible to truly change? If someone who has hurt you deeply can become the person you need them to be? Gabriel and Sophia's story shows us that real transformation is possible, but only when we're willing to be vulnerable enough to admit our mistakes and brave enough to risk everything for love. The lesson isn't that you should stay with someone who treats you badly. Sophia was right to leave when Gabriel couldn't see her worth. The lesson is that people can grow, hearts can heal, and sometimes the love we think we've lost is just waiting for us to become brave enough to fight for it. Gabriel learned that success without love is just expensive emptiness. Sophia learned that she didn't need someone else to complete her, but that sharing your complete self with the right person can create something more beautiful than either of you could build alone. Their marriage certificate now hangs in Sophia's studio, next to a painting of two people dancing in the rain. It's not a business document anymore. It's a promise that love is worth the risk, that vulnerability is strength, and that the best things in life are worth fighting for. If this story moved you, if you've ever been afraid to open your heart or wondered whether someone can really change, hit that like button right now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late for a second chance. And subscribe because love stories like this one remind us why we're all here, to connect, to grow, and to discover that the greatest success isn't what we achieve, but who we become and who we choose to love along the way. Remember, the biggest risk in life isn't loving someone who might hurt you. The biggest risk is building walls so high that you miss out on the love that could transform everything. Don't let fear make your choices. Choose love. Choose vulnerability. Choose the possibility that your story, like Gabriel and Sophia's, might have a beautiful second chapter waiting to be written. What choice are you going to make today?